Hi everyone, I am back today with a new tote bag tutorial, and this one is a really fun one. There is some piecing on the front and back so you can mix different colors or prints. It ends up a nice large size that is perfect for an entire day out of the house, and it includes nice roomy pockets that are unlike any I've shown how to make here on my channel before, and you definitely don't want to miss out. There is a PDF that accompanies this tutorial that includes all of the cutting details, the yardage that you need, and lots of other details. And if you are already a patron of mine over on Patreon, the PDF was loaded for you a couple of days ago, so head over there to download it. If not, you can go to my website, whitneysews.com, click on the shop tab, and you can find your PDF there along with all the other PDFs that I already have. The direct link will of course be down below in the description box, and after you check out, there will be a purple box that you can click to instantly download your PDF to your device. You don't need to wait for an email or anything, just click that button and you'll have your PDF right then. This tote bag, like most other ones, is made from basically squares and rectangles, so there's no need for actual pattern pieces. You just need the measurements for the pieces and a couple of acrylic rulers, a rotary cutter, you know, basic supplies like that, and you are good to go. I will have all the supplies that I'm using linked down below in the video description box, as well as a video that I shared just a little while back where I showed how to use two rulers to get super accurate measuring and cuts. We're going to start by sewing the bag outer pieces. Lay the upper and lower pieces right sides together, matching up the bottom edge. Sew to attach with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Do this for the bag front and back to make the color blocked design. Open the pieces up and press so the seam allowances are going toward the darker fabric so they don't show through on the front side. Sew a top stitch to keep the seam allowances laying nice and flat. Do these steps for the bag front and back. Now to give the pieces some structure, grab your fusible fleece and lay it with the textured side down against the back side of the fabric. The fusible fleece should be a 1/2 inch smaller than the fabric, so try to center it so there is a small border of fabric all the way around. Set your iron according to the fusible instructions and fuse into place. It's hard to tell because the footage is sped up, but you don't want to slide your iron around while fusing. Instead, press, lift the iron, and set back down in the next place. This keeps things from stretching or warping. Repeat with the bag lining, placing the textured side of the interfacing against the back side of the lining fabric. Press to fuse. I don't normally interface lining fabrics, but since the pockets are sewn to the lining, I wanted to give it a little extra structure. And finally, the fusible fleece needs to be added to the straps. The fusible fleece needs to be centered on the back side of the strap fabric so there is a 1/2 inch showing on each side. Fuse into place. The reason the fusible fleece is done this way is so the fabric can be turned in using the edge of the interfacing as a guide, and that is actually the next thing we'll do. Turn both long edges in and press so they stay in place. Then fold it in half and press again. I love making straps this way because I don't have to try to turn them right sides out later, which is my least favorite thing to do. All the long sides' raw edges should be tucked inside, and the short ends still have raw edges because they will be tucked away in the bag later. Sew along the long open side to close up the strap, then along the other long side to make it symmetrical and have a nice finished look. Repeat these steps for the second strap, then set aside for later. Now let's prep the pockets. Match up the pocket pieces right sides together. Sew around the pockets, leaving a gap in the top for turning through later. It's important that the gap is on the top because of how they will be sewn closed and finished later. I did add some craft clips to help hold the fabrics together while I sewed. Feel free to use all the pins or clips you need, even if I don't show using them on a certain step. Here are the pockets with the 3 to 4 inch opening in the top. Trim off the corners so they will look nice and pointed when turned right sides out. Reach in through the opening and turn each pocket right sides out. Grab a point turner or whatever semi-pointed but not too sharp of an item to get the corners nice and crisp looking. Tuck in the seam allowances of the opening and give both pockets a nice press so all the edges are nice and smooth. Sew a top stitch across the entire top edge of both pockets. This closes up the openings and finishes that edge for later. I did 2 rows of stitching on mine just because I like the look of it more than 1 row. On the larger pocket, find and mark the center with a disappearing marking tool. Then mark 1.5 inches away from the center line on each side. And finally, mark 1.5 inches in from the outer edges. You want all these markings to be as straight and evenly measured as possible. Fold on the marked lines so the back sides of the pockets are touching and the good side is facing out. Add a couple of clips to hold each fold in place. The only line you do not do this for is the very center line. Take it to the sewing machine and sew 1/8 inch from the folded edge on each. Backstitch at the beginning and ending of each stitching line. Here is a quick glimpse of how the pocket is going to come together to be super roomy using the pin tucks we just sewed and pleats. Place the pocket on one of the lining pieces 4.5 inches down from the top edge and make sure the center line of the pocket is centered on the piece. Add a couple of pins around that center line. Bring the nearest pen tuck over so it lines up with the center line and the outer pen tuck to match up with the outer edge. It should look as shown here on the left. Pen the outer side in place. Repeat for the other half, bringing the nearest pen tuck to the center line, then matching the outer pen tuck up with the end to make the other pleat and pen. They should look like this with lots of room in the pockets. Sew along each short side to attach and directly on top of the marked center line. Now that those are sewn, it's time to close up the bottom. With the pleats in their correct position, sew all the way across the bottom. You are sewing through several layers of fabric here because of the pleats, which is why it's important to not use a heavy or thick fabric for the pockets. The lining of my bag and the inside of the pocket is a linen blend curtain fabric, and it was almost too thick to sew through here. I ended up sewing along the bottom edge twice just to make sure it was nice and secure. I am in love with these pockets. They definitely take a bit of work to make, but are so worth it when the bag is finished. Now for the other pocket. Place it on the other lining piece so it is centered side to side and about 5 inches down from the top. Add a few pins to hold it in place, then mark where you want the pocket to be divided at. I marked down the center, so I will end up with 2 sections of the same size. Sew along the side, bottom, and other side, then down the marked dividing line. Don't forget to backstitch. All the pockets are sewn, and now it's time to assemble the rest of the bag. Lay the bag outer pieces right sides together, matching up the edges. Add clips and sew along the sides and bottom with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Repeat with the lining pieces, but make sure to leave a 5-inch opening in one side for turning the bag through later. I used a seam allowance that was just a tiny bit wider on the lining to keep the lining from being baggy inside, which happens to lots of tote bags. The corners of the outer and lining all need to be boxed. Flatten the corner so the bag's side seam and the bottom seam line up. Make sure the seam allowances are going in opposite directions so they sort of nest together and everything is laying flat. Lay a ruler on top and adjust so the corner is taking up 5 inches across. This will give the bag a 5-inch depth. Mark that line and add a few clips to hold the corner in place. Repeat for the other 3 corners. Sew directly on top of the marked lines. Here's how they should look. I trimmed off the excess for the outer fabric because it has the thicker fusible fleece, but left the corners on the lining. Turn the bag outer right sides out. Then grab one of the straps and position it on one of the sides so the raw edges of the straps are extending about a 1/4 inch past the bag top. I measured to make sure each strap end was about 4 inches from the side seam and used large clips to hold into place. And repeat with the other strap on the second side. Sew across the ends of the straps at each point about a 1/4 inch from the edge to attach. Now insert the bag outer into the lining so they are right sides together. Match up the side seams and the top edges and use as many clips or pins as needed to hold the layers together. Sew all the way around the top using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Here's how it should look. We're so close to being done. Remember the opening that was left in the side of the lining? Reach in through it to turn the entire bag right sides out. Take your time and poke out the corners and smooth out the seams so your bag looks super nice. Tuck the seam allowances of the opening to the inside and match up the folded edges. Clip and sew a top stitch to attach. Or you can hand sew it closed if you want it to show less. I don't worry about the top stitching showing because it's down inside the bag. Push the lining down into the bag and smooth out the top edge. I position it so the outer fabric just barely wraps around to the inside so the lining isn't showing at the top edge. Then sew a top stitch all the way around. And the bag is finished! Here's a few more pictures of the awesome pockets inside the bag and of the bag itself. It is a nice, large bag ready for holding everything you need for the entire day. If you make this bag, I would love to see a picture of it. You can either tag me on Instagram or you can share a picture on the Whitney Sews Facebook page. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button down below. And until next time, happy sewing.